Okay.
Okay. So we are group five, and we got together tonight to discuss the exploring cultural discourse on mental health and how the mental health stigmas can affect different parts of providing therapy. We had a lot of fun hanging out, getting to know each other a little bit better, and answering the questions. So these are our responses to the questions. So Vicky, if you want to go ahead and start us off.
All right, so the very first question is asking, what are the messages that you received in your culture of origin or family of origin about mental health or mental illness? And so let's go with Erin.
Okay. So, mental health issues such as depression or anxiety were never discussed from my family of origin when I was a child. I was never even aware of such things as anxiety or depression. I certainly was not aware of mental health issues like schizophrenia or bipolar, nothing of the sort. Um, so as I reflect back, I don't even know if I had experiences with people who experienced those things, or if looking back, I even knew of a family member or a situation where I would have been able to make a connection like, oh, that's what that was. I I'm sure it existed. I just don't have any experiences that I can connect to from my childhood or my family of origin.
Yeah, very nice. And let's hear from one more person. How about Crene?
In my culture, mental health was not discussed. My uncle, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but there was never a conversation about resources or services that could help him. It was normal to see like dysfunction, other than getting help for the problem.
Okay, nice. All right, so let's go with the next question. So I'll turn it over to Liz.
Okay, the next question is, what resources were you aware were available for mental health, if any, when you were growing up, prior to pursuing your MFT degree? If you were not aware of mental health resources earlier in life, what are your thoughts about that? We can go with Vicky.
So I was aware, but not until college that to go to therapy. Um, and for other than going to therapy, maybe that was my first time reading some self-help books. And as far as um if I well, yeah, those were probably my main resources. And since then I've just learned more and more and as a result chose MFT as a career.
Okay. What about you, Krene? Can you answer
Um,
that for us?
yeah. I was not aware of mental health services available when I was growing up. Learning about mental health growing up could have been beneficial to me as a child because the things I was going through, I had no help or support.
Okay. One more person. How about Stephanie?
Yeah, so for me, my experience was similar to Erin's growing up. We didn't know anybody in our, community. We didn't know a lot of people who were dealing with mental illness or dealing with any mental health challenges. So when it comes to the treatment or the resources that were available, it just wasn't something that we were aware of or that we talked about very much. I do remember, I think it was when I was in college that just kind of starting to feel like I was having a tricky time processing some stuff. And I remember mentioning it to my parents, and it wasn't that it was kind of like a negative response to it, almost like we didn't want to admit that maybe I might need to do something. Like it was kind of seen like a negative thing. Again, I think there was some stigma with that. But then as I got older and started to work through some stuff and go to therapy, my family's attitude shifted and they became much more open. And I think just seeing me go through it, I was kind of the first one in my family to just make that jump. And so it made us much more aware of some of those resources and how they can help us.
Okay. Now we're gonna turn it over to Erin for the next question.
So the question is, how do you think that mental health stigma can contribute to cross-cultural barriers to care? And let's go with Vicky.
So for me, yeah, in my culture in general, mental health is just not talked about. There's like a stigma. And so I think being here, we're like, at least for my culture, we are influenced by just the constant mental health talk. It's open, it's something that's um just not to be ashamed about. And there's just a lot of shame and guilt in mental health in my culture. So I'd say that's how um it's just sort of cross barriers.
Okay, thank you, Vicky. Liz, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think for my culture, it's also there's a stigma as well, especially for men. In my culture, it's the whole like boys don't cry, you have to be a man. So there's that aspect and point of view from people in my culture. So yeah, I mean, now I think it's starting to shift with like the new generation, where, we're encouraging therapy. At least for me, I encourage my sons, especially because they're boys, to, talk about their feelings, go to therapy, and yeah, just, don't be ashamed to to go to therapy and seek help.
Thank you, Liz.
Mhm.
I'll turn question number 4 over to Krene.
So just quickly, I just wanted to, because I what Stephanie had went over about her experience in going to college and just needing that therapy and that extra just support. I wanted to kind of just like touch on, it just kind of came up for me because I think I talked about how as a child I didn't get the support, and I remember losing my grandmother in seventh grade, and I remember my mother talking about getting therapy, for myself and for my siblings. And I remember my grandpa said they don't need therapy. Like, like we're going to be okay. We don't need therapy. And as Stephanie just mentioned, that it was a stigma that therapy it was negative, and that if you were going to therapy, you were, crazy, or, or something was lacking in the home. So I just want to kind of just go back to that, because as she was speaking about her parents and in that experience, I had that same experience with my grandfather. My mother was like, she wanted to, but she was influenced by her dad, so she went ahead and we didn't do therapy, and it was just problems after problems after problems. So definitely have that same, some similar experience with you, Stephanie, with your parents and my grandpa and my mother. um but the question here, question number 4 is, how do you think that your own exposure to mental health stigma may influence your ability to prioritize self care once you start seeing clients? What is your plan to prioritize self care once you start seeing clients? Does that make sense, y'all? If I have to repeat
Yeah.
it, I will. Okay. So this is for Stephanie.
Yeah, so I think, like a lot of us have said, just as people who are going into this profession, we ourselves have overcome that stigma and we realize the need for it. So for me personally, having kind of gone through that transition and realizing, oh, this is so helpful to have somebody to help me put myself first and prioritize, and um, then also just, my plan going forward is like some of us mentioned before we started recording this, but just right now being in a tough program that's really demanding and balancing all the things, I think in a way we're already learning to put self-care first. So um, just continuing that as I go through the program and as we start to get our hours and as we start to get practice, just making sure that even just 5 minutes for me to just kind of walk away and have some quiet and drink some water and have a snack. Sometimes just for me, that's all I need. So just making sure that we maintain that plan as we start to help others.
Yeah, very good. Definitely agree with you, Stephanie. Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
I would like to add that I think that we have to be mindful as clinicians about the stigma that we, as mental health clinicians, don't need the self-care, that somehow we have the answers and therefore we're exempt, but we need to be gracious with ourselves and allow ourselves to have the time that we need to recharge and to take care of ourselves.
Okay, and Liz?
Um, I really like what Erin said about, taking the stigma away from being like a therapist and not needing or having all the answers. So I think that I would prioritize my mental health by going to therapy myself as a therapist. Um, but, also taking time off whenever I feel burnt out. I think that's a good way to um, prioritize my mental health and kind of just step away and just, leave things as they are for that moment.
That's great. So we've come to the end of our discussion and we had a lot of fun working on this assignment. Like some of us said, these aren't necessarily questions we would have asked, they wouldn't have come up just a normal conversation, but it's been really nice for all of us to connect and get to know each other a little bit better and get to see each other's opinions on these different things. So we appreciate the assignment and we look forward to continuing to work together.
I agree.